ethos. I'm David Jorgensen. I'm a senior undergraduate at Newton College studying philosophy. So, this will be fun. Some of you just started groaning, but that's okay. So philosophy, what is the meaning of life? I think I'm joking. That's the topic of my paper. What is the meaning of this life? And I think it's really easy as Christians to think we have this all figured out. So I'm going to try to state the problem in a way that I think all of us can really resonate with. So, what is the meaning of this life? And the first person I want to talk about, Friedrich Nietzsche. Ooh, hits. Okay, but the self-proclaimed Antichrist actually has some really interesting things that I think we can learn about. And what he talks about is after-worldsmen. And his critique is that Christians, from his view, their whole purpose is to get to the afterlife. And what he calls it is to reach the ultimate with the ultimate death leap. And this sounds just like a little less heretical Gnosticism, but still not good. So how do we actually affirm meaning in this life and not just think about the next life? How do we not just think about the end, is another presentation put it. And so that's the first challenge, but the second one I think is also very difficult, and that comes from Martin Hagland. Is his book, This Life. So we're trying to figure out the meaning of this, but sorry, I had to make that joke. But the thing he puts out is he says, how do we find meaning in this life with the thought of the afterlife in view? And so his problem that we have to face is that if we look at the story of Abraham and Isaac, we can have so much concern for this life, but if there's any concern from the afterlife, from the eternal, it seems as though we have to put that above this life. So how do we fully live for this life and fully affirm meaning in this life if we're always going to have the view of the eternal, the infinite, of God in view? So that's the problem I'm trying to solve. I'm working on it. So I don't know if this fully responds to that, but Hackland's actually coming to Wheaton College in the spring, so I'll let you know how it goes. So basically, how do we live in the already and live for the already, but also know that there's a not yet? That is the tension I'm trying to figure out. So my response, instead of just looking at categorical things that we can disagree with them about, I'm going to try to give a beautiful response, something that they might actually appreciate. So I'm going to say that our sub-creation, the things that we create, are a way to affirm meaning in this life, and that outpouring from our position as sub-creators can allow us to say that there is meaning in this life. And I think this responds well to Nietzsche, but I don't know if we can fully respond to Hackland, or if we should. That I don't know if we can say that there is always going to be more meaning in this life. That's just something to think about. So, to begin, Watkins' creativity as sacrifice. Now I'm going to try to make a simple claim, but hopefully it's general enough we can all agree and not make everyone mad. So I think we're creating the Imago Dei, and based on the relationality, the functionality, and the structure, but it sounds better with the it-ality. But we're called to create and to creativity. And so he gets this term from Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings guy, who says sub-creators, where we're creating from our Imago Dei, not ex nihilo like God, but we're creating within that world. So I like that term. I used it for the paper. So, and then we go on to Trevor Hart, who says that this creation, we create these secondary realities, which are different from the primary realities. They're different from the world we're in. We can create these things, these worlds, and they're a way to affirm meaning, and they come out of our love and concern for this world. And from the greatest love and concern for this world, the incarnation. I think I'm doing theology now, not just philosophy, so I'm working on it. So this all sounds great. Sub-creation. We can create. What does that mean? And instead of giving necessary and sufficient conditions, because that's the philosophy that people are normally like, oh, you study philosophy. I'm glad you like that. Instead of giving those, I'm going to try to give a beautiful answer. That's what my professor always says. It's trying to give a beautiful answer. So let's begin with Schleiermacher, which we'll see how that goes. You either love him or hate him. But yeah, on religion, in his Apology, he talks about our role as mediators between Christ and man. And so the example he gives is, he said, someone with just so much joy in this life, when they have a vocation, and they're not a Christian, but they have a vocation, that people just can sense this joy, and that they can show them something deeper in this world. And he says, so much greater as Christians, if as Christians we can go and have this experience with God, and then from that we go and create. And so he has a beautiful quotation where he says, after every flight of their spirit to the infinite, they must set down in pictures or words the impression it made on them as an object, so as to enjoy it themselves. And they must also instinctively, and as it were enrapturedly, represent for others what they have encountered, as poets and seers, as orators, or as artists. And so I hope that this can give you a better sense of what subcreation is. It's not just being an artist, it's not just being a poet. Maybe it's theology, maybe it's philosophy. Yes. So I'm trying to give a better picture of what subcreation is. And it's amazing because it's almost like this subcreation merges the infinite and the finite, that they can touch at a point, and that we can try to show people something beyond just our reality. And so, this brings us to the next book by Malcolm Guite, who I heard was here recently. So, that's exciting. Lifting the Veil. And what he talks about is a truth-bearing facility where it seems as there's something in the things that we create that can show more than maybe just a syllogism, that can show more than just an argument. And so this creation that we have, he says it so beautifully. So again, we're mediators between Christ and man, and I quote, we can show our fellow man what is really there, something numinous, translucent, with glimmerings of the supernatural, of something holy shining through it. This is building on Coleridge's idea of the numinous. And this also builds on the idea of subcreation, which I got to through Watkins and Tolkien and Hart. But he does it all at once, so I should have just gone with him. But we got there eventually. And so I think this purpose of bringing people to a higher, deeper spiritual reality, it's one that we don't find simply in the end. Yes, Jesus will come back and everyone will see him. But this is something that we work towards on a daily basis. This is something that gives us meaning in our day-to-day lives through the things we create. And so he puts it as we subcreate to lift the veil, remove the film of familiarity, opening our eyes and ears, and most of all, our hearts, not only to the loveliness and wonders of the world before, in inexhaustible treasure, but also to the one through all these things were made, in whom they hold together, to God and to Jesus. But the way I think this can respond to Nietzsche and Hagelin is saying that there's a double movement of we see beauty in nature, we see beauty in this life, and it calls us to create. It makes us want to put these things down as poets, as theologians, as philosophers. Yes, I'll get you guys there eventually. But it makes us want to create from the things we see in this earth and create something on this earth that's beautiful. But also, we see things from God that make us want to create these beautiful things to bring people back to God. We're doing things from the finite to the finite, but also from the infinite to the infinite. So one of the best analogies I've seen of how to do this is from Norman Mears's This Sacred Life. And so I think this is a great response to this life, this sacred life. I mean, it's just a name, but he also, in a footnote, basically just dismisses the definitions, but he also gives a very beautiful image of this. And it's of the garden. And we've had a lot of responses in the first session that I think respond well to this. An ecological response of why there's meaning in this life. And he almost returns to that image and says, why were Adam and Eve in a garden? And okay, on the surface, we get to see that we're dependent on the earth. But also, we get to see how interdependent we are and rooted in this world. And he says that gardening is a paradigmatic form of work that places our bodies and situates our imaginations in the context of life's germination, growth, and flowering. We get to see food as a gift. We get to see this life as a gift. And it fights against the commodification logic that Rudolph so greatly exemplifies. Thank you. And so I think what's great about this is it's not a call to be consumed by the world, but be attuned to the world. That we get to see the world and understand it. And from that, find beauty and create that beauty. So let's try to bridge the gap a little between Nietzsche and Hagelin and between subcreation. And I think that one way to do that is returning to Nietzsche. I don't think you thought you were going to hear that sentence today, but I think he gives us something that we can really latch onto that's really beautiful. And he says that the things we create should give us joy. And here's where his atheistic, anti-Christ humanism comes in. But he says, create things in our image so that we see the world as beautiful and it gives us joy. What if we change that to create things in God's image so that we can see things as beautiful and they give us joy? So our subcreation should be a bridge between this world and the next world, affirming meaning in this life and pointing people to the next life. Maybe just gesturing. I don't know if we can do it fully. And so that's how I'm hoping to bridge the gap. And I think I can respond to Nietzsche. And I think Hagelin might enjoy it. I'll let you know. But yeah, I think my challenge to you is, can you really do your theology and your philosophy and your art and your vocation in a way that brings you joy in this life? And maybe then, if you can create that joy for you and others, that we'll really be able to live in our calling as sub-creators. Thank you.
It strikes me that Nietzsche's sort of push for us to create in our image actually connects with Genesis also, because I think it's when Seth was born, it said that he's in the image of his father. And so you almost have this kind of like Seth in the image of Adam, who's in the image of God, but Seth's also in the image of God. But anyways, I wonder if you could say a little bit more about our participation in creating things and how we can ensure that what we're creating, to use some more Tolkien language, the Lord of the Rings guy, that it pushes us towards you formation, good formation, rather than malformation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Difficult question. But I think that's where the focus on like having these experiences with God and being rooted in God, but also being attuned to the world comes in, where we can judge our creation based on our relationship with God, but it can also stem from our life in this world and the joy in this world.
Others. Brayden.
You spoke a little bit about the idea of like sub-creation, kind of not just including, I guess, what we would traditionally think of as, I guess, creative, like Tolkien writing on the rings sort of thing, right? But also including these other vocations. What do you think that looks like for, I guess, a little bit less traditional sort of thought of sub-creation, like I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. Somebody give me an accountant. As an accountant, can an accountant be sub-creation?
We're going to the necessary and sufficient conditions. You're being the philosophy major, not me. So I would say there's beautiful ways to do any vocation, and there's beautiful ways to create joy in life and to attune people to the joy and the beauty in this life. And so I think an accountant, in a way, could do that through their numbers, but I'm not exactly sure. So, yeah, I love the question. I appreciate it.
Others.
I have a question. Oh, go. it strikes me that your kind of final turn is another way of putting what you're describing is sort of reframing our work and our creation in the sacramental context as a way of participating with what God is doing in the world, as opposed to maybe working against what God is doing in the world. And I'm curious if you're familiar with the Jewish concept of tikkun olam, which is translated as repairing the world. And it's a way of viewing our participation, our engagement with the world that suggests any little thing we do, whether it's making a spreadsheet that makes our numbers look beautiful and work, or changing the oil in our car, or changing a baby's diaper, or writing a paper, is an active participation with God in the renewal of all things. And I'm curious if you're familiar with that, but if you're not, well, how do you hear that idea in relation to what you're suggesting?
I've not heard that. I don't think Nietzsche's heard that either, so I think that would be a good response too. But yeah, I love the idea, and I think that works really well. Of like, we've heard about like repairing the ecology and the environment, but also repairing everyday life and seeing the joy and beauty in everyday life. I think that's really spot on. So thank you for. We'll talk after.
I think I have time for one more. Oh, good, okay.
Oh, you don't want to be next.
So as far as that message of us being sub-creators within God's creation, how do you encourage somebody, either in church life or as a church community, who might not consider themselves creative per se? How would you encourage them?
Yeah, I had a conversation yesterday where I was like, I don't think I'm very creative. And they actually pointed out to me just like everything can be a creative act. And I think that's why I've been pushing the whole beauty and joy thing, because that's something a lot of people can latch onto of like, live a beautiful life. If you're laying bricks, do it in a beautiful way. If you're being an accountant, do it in a beautiful way. If you're doing theology or philosophy, do it in a beautiful way. So, yeah.
I think we have time actually for one more question. Like they sustained
Okay, so I'm wondering if there's anybody, author or philosopher, or maybe even a theologian, behind, I know there's a professor for sure, because you've mentioned it, behind your use of beauty and joy and goodness, like, who's speaking behind those words? Because it could be anything to anybody, right?
Here's the fun part. That professor, I was in a Nietzsche seminar. So this guy, he has taught me so much about seeing the beauty in this world and seeing the joy in this world from a very atheistic conception. And so that professor has done an amazing job at saying, well, how do you see the beauty in Nietzsche's work and in much of the existentialist work? And all these who are typically shown as very upset Frenchmen in the modern philosophy. How do we see the beauty in their work? And so I think Nietzsche's actually been a good avenue for that, and why I would love to respond to it.
Can we thank David again?